Good morning. Welcome. We're live. Welcome to Tuesdays with Kamyra. Today we're talking puberty. We're talking puberty with Melissa Pintor Carnagey, who will empower us, all of we adults who are parenting teens. She's going to empower us to navigate that terrain while creating safe and brave spaces for our families. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Kamyra. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Melissa is a renowned sexual educator, best-selling author, and leading national voice for sex-positive education. She's the founder of Sex Positive Families, an online platform that provides education and resources to families wishing to raise sexually healthy children. Melissa will be answering your questions for those who are joining us live this morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please type your questions in the comment section. I will be looking for them and I will post them and Melissa will address them. If you are watching a replay, thank you and welcome. You can put your comments and questions in the comment section and dialogue with other people who are watching the replay, but Melissa won't be available to answer your questions. Good morning, Melissa, again. Thank you for joining us again. And let's begin with you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this line of work.
Yes. So I, like many adults of today, I am someone who grew up without sex education, without information that is more readily accessible today related to bodies and sexuality. I grew up in Texas, and so we didn't have sex ed. I barely remember a puberty education lesson that may have happened. And as I moved into adulthood and certainly pursuing career, I was very interested in things related to sexuality and sexual health. And I think that had to do a lot with the taboos and the stigmas that I picked up on. And then culturally in my home, these things were not talked about at all. And so what I did know and pick up on was through media. I did not grow up in the generation of the internet per se. And so it's, not like today where young people have access through cell phones, to the World Wide Web. Mm-hmm. And so it was a lot of trial and error, having to figure out things about myself in relation to other people. I became a young parent at 17. And I do believe strongly that if I had had sexuality education, if I'd had open, honest, shame-free support, that I would have been better equipped to make some different choices related to my sexual health. And so in pursuing my own career, I'm a licensed social worker, and I got into the realm of sexual health almost 15 years ago, and I never looked back. I worked in HIV and sexually transmitted infection, doing case management related work, disease surveillance work. And there was always a common theme and thread of adults, that are living with HIV, STIs, and having different sexual health concerns. And it was that there was a lot of taboo. There wasn't open, honest education. And so in 2017, I transitioned into my work with sex positive families and helping adults and parents teach a younger generation. Personally, I'm a parent of 3. I have a 22-year-old, I have an 11-year-old, and I have a 7-year-old. So I have 2 young people that are navigating puberty and one that we've done all the ages and stages with. And so I've had the chance to parent and raise and mentor young people through sexual health. And I've seen firsthand how keeping these conversations open and providing them with the education that helps them make informed decisions really is a game changer.
You have just touched upon a couple of things I want you to define for us. But first, I mentioned that you are the author of a best-selling book, and I want everybody to see the book. Can you hold it up for us?
Yes. It is Sex Positive Talks to Have with Kids, a guide to raising sexually healthy, informed, empowered young people. This takes folks through every age and stage, so birth through the teen years. And so it really drives home the point that, sexuality, sexual health is not just about sex. It's not something that's just about puberty and hormones or horniness. It's not just something for the teen years. There are building blocks and foundations that are established, really from the beginning of life, that are opportunities for families to create sexual health and empowerment.
Okay. So I know that there are some parents out there saying, I thought we were talking about puberty, and I keep hearing them use the word sex. So let's define some terms for people. Let's define sexual health, puberty, and puberty education.
Yeah. So sexual health, according to the World Health Organization, is the state of physical, mental, and social well-being as it relates to sexuality. And like I said, sexuality is not just about sex. There are many, many things that as we are, relating to our humanness, to, being embodied in our own bodies and in relation to other people, that are not just about sex. And puberty is the process of changes that cause a child's body to mature into an adult body that may be able to reproduce. And so puberty is something that all bodies to some degree will go through if they transition into adulthood. And so it is a pretty universal experience in that regard, but how it can happen for everybody is completely unique. When it may happen, how long it may happen, and what different experiences people will have are completely unique. And so puberty education is the opportunity to inform young people, people of all ages, but especially young people, about these experiences so they're prepared and not scared.
Okay, you mentioned ages and stages. Can you tell us what the puberty ages and stages are? And then we'll pause.
Yeah, so there can be a misconception around this. Many times people may think about puberty as maybe something just in the, later tween or early teen years, but it is very common for puberty to begin in ages as early as 8 or 9. Medically, that can be called precocious puberty or early puberty, but it is quite common, again, because puberty is not just like this one event or one thing that just happens and then you're done. I always tell young people, gosh, wouldn't that be cool? It probably would be painful, but it'd be cool if you could just get it over in like one day or something, right? It's not. It can take, 5 to 7 years. Again, there's such a range. Development and developing into adulthood takes time. And so there are many, many different changes that people can experience in that. So it just becomes so important that we help prepare our young people. Because if many of us think back to what those experiences might have been like for us, and who was talking to us about those things, what were we feeling? How prepared did we feel? Lots of bullying, right, can happen in these years. And a lot of that, I do believe, has to do with the fact that there's so much, silence, and there's so much anxiety and insecurity that can happen for young people because they're not aware. There's, discomfort that they're going to experience, so many changes. And if no one's talking to them and normalizing these experiences for them and with them and encouraging that this is not something that you're the only one that's experiencing, you're not alone, that can help to ease those stressors or that anxiety that can happen over those years.
So what are you hearing from tweens and teens? What are the stressors or the positives? What are you hearing, and what should we parents know that you're hearing?
Yeah. So young people have amazing questions. Really, especially within puberty education and sexuality education, questions are the heart and soul of those classes. The thing is, if they don't feel safe to ask any question, then they will keep that inside. They will find other avenues to get their answers. And these days, that can be dangerous because we've got the internet, we've got online pornography, we have other teachers, that are accessible 24 hours a day and with less filters than some of us had, in prior generations. And so, that said, it's important that we see young people's curiosities and questions about bodies, about gender, about relationships, about sex, that we see those as completely age congruent, completely relevant to their developmental process. It is how they're making sense of their world. So how can we ensure that we're more confident, that we're more equipped, that we're more prepared to show up for these talks and to create those brave and safe spaces for these really important conversations? It's about helping them develop life skills that ultimately keep them safer.
And how do we do that? What are the skills that we need to be helping them develop? And how do we do that? We're a parent. I'm a parent. As you and I discussed in the pregame, it's never too late to have these conversations, and it should be conversations plural. It's not the one, this is how your body works, which is what a lot of us find the traditional conversation. Before
hand the book and run away.
Read the book. If you have any questions, come find me. Yeah. If you have questions for Melissa, comments, something you want to tell us that's happening in your family, please put it in the comment section so that she can address it online. Especially if you have questions about how you're going to have these conversations within your family. But really, what are the things that we should be looking out for? What are the things teens want to know? How should we be empowering them?
Yeah, well, I want to start by saying that and acknowledging that if you're feeling any bit nervous or unsure or uncomfortable or even triggered by any of these topics and conversations, that is completely normal. It's common, it's typical. And remembering that has a lot to do with our experiences. Many of us did not grow up with this being modeled for us. We didn't grow up, many of us, with an adult or even maybe a school system that was making these conversations comfortable and without shame. And so it makes it hard for us to duplicate something that we didn't experience. So that's kind of number one. There's nothing bad or wrong with you as a parent or as a caregiver if you're finding yourself feeling like you'd rather avoid this. But I think many of us have the context of having then lived out what it's like when you don't have this kind of support. And if I'd had this kind of support, gosh, if I'd only known, right? And, one really common element, unfortunately, in our society, when it comes to the health and body literacy of folks that have vaginas, uteruses, vulvas, right? There's a lot of undereducation. There's a lot of miseducation. And it's like, if I only really knew what menstruation really was about, what it was for, what was really happening during that, right? And then translating that to even people that don't have those body parts. Wow, right? Right now, with everything that's going on politically, and that's continues to go on politically, if the folks that are making those decisions, which many times don't actually have those body parts, if they had puberty education, quality puberty education, if they'd had sexuality education, I want to believe that they would be able to make more informed decisions that, again, impact, so many other people. So it's, again, important for us to see kind of that bigger picture of why. What's our why? Why do we think it's important that our young people know and come to understand their bodies, other people's bodies, and these very human things that happen?
I think one thing you said that's critically important is not only know your body, but other people's bodies. So we should be teaching our male children about menstruation as well as our female children. And we should be teaching our female children about ejaculation as well as our male children and all the other stuff, because this is gender parts, but there's so much other stuff that we should be teaching them that maybe we don't, and have multiple conversations. I remember picking my son up from school once, one of my sons, and I was like, "Oh, how was school today?" And he was like, "Oh my gosh, it was one of their health talks, sex ed talks, and they really got into reproduction or something. I'm not even sure what. We had these talks as a family, so I thought it was no big deal." And I said, "Well, what did you talk about?" And describe something, and it was something that I hadn't gotten as detailed about yet. And then finally he's like, "Can we stop? I need a milkshake." That so that families know that
Yes.
your family may need a milkshake afterwards, but
Listen,
it's okay.
they're over here giving safe words like they're trying to get right. And so, yeah, like you don't need to have a whole PowerPoint presentation prepared for these conversations. There are many, many opportunities. And that's why it's so important to see that all of these talks can really begin early. And, something when we talk about menstruation, if you are someone who menstruates, there are opportunities into the early years, right? Many times we may not have privacy when we're using the restroom, when we have, preschoolers, toddlers, right? They're wanting to be all up in our business. And so there's a conscious moment there for many folks that, have uteruses or that may menstruate, that can commonly come up where you're deciding in that moment when that young person may be noticing a menstrual product that you have in the home, or maybe in the space, when you are menstruating, right? Or you are changing one of your menstrual products. Are we using that as a teachable moment? When they ask us a question, because those early questions, they're usually unfiltered. They become more filtered over time if they pick up any messages or signals that, oh, when I asked that one question, I got this kind of reaction, or my parents seemed to clam up, or they told me to be quiet or not to ask that, or I'm too young to know about that. So it's so important for us to remember that if they're asking, then they deserve an answer, right?
Yeah.
And it's not our job to know all the things. Like that's an unrealistic expectation. What is our job is to be available and be accessible. And we can say, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked. I'm not sure. Let's find that out together. Or I'll take a look at that and I'll come back to you. And then you actually come back to the conversation. And today we just have so many resources, so many books, so many fun video series, so many podcast episodes, websites. There are just so many resources that are making it easier to talk about these topics. So we don't even have to know all the words, know all the terms. We can learn with our young people.
Can you share with us some of the resources, maybe some of the books and stuff, some of the resources? And she'll share some verbally, and we're going to post some in the comment section so you don't have to rush and try to write them all down now while you're listening.
Yeah. Anyone that follows Sex Positive Families, we keep a robust list of sex positive, sexual health, puberty education resources to help support the talks. So this one's one of our favorites. It's called Wait, What? It's a comic book guide to relationships, bodies, growing up. It's by Heather Corinna, who's the founder of Scarletine. Love this because it is graphic novel style. So this is also real, and it's got some engaging, fun activities within it. It's inclusive across the gender spectrum and sexuality spectrum. So it's really good with that graphic novel style, especially if you have a young person that is on the autism spectrum. Graphic novel style books are really, really great. Also, Vaginas and Periods 101, a pop-up book. Have you ever seen a book with a pop-up vulva? Great, right? Same thing. It's inclusive. It doesn't gender, bodies or experiences. And it's fun and interactive. And we have a lot of families who buy this book while their kids are still very young. And again, because it's completely interactive, just letting your young person explore. And I want to point out this here. When I know the authors, and when this prototype, came out, I met them at a conference and they showed this to me, and I literally was to tears because I was like, oh my gosh, if I had seen something like this, that vulvas can be beautifully diverse. And if I had been encouraged to look at my body in the mirror and get to know my body and see that being normalized. So those are two. There's so many books. Also, amaze.org is an awesome resource. They make videos for tweens and teens that are short, they're funny, they're engaging, and they help you have those conversations. They also have videos and content for the early ages, so you can build those foundations, and also resources directly for parents and caregivers and educators as well.
Thank you for that. That is so valuable. And I know it differs because children are unique beings, but what should they know at different ages and stages? And we as parents should make sure that, because parents have checklists. So what should we make sure that we can check off at the different ages and stages?
Yeah, so I would say certainly across all the ages and stages, they should know that bodies are unique. Bodies are amazing. There are many parts and functions. They should, from the earlier ages for sure, they should know the exact names for body parts, especially genitals, right? These are words that often get silenced, or there are nicknames or euphemisms given for these particular body parts, but they should know vulva, vagina, penis, clitoris, anus, right? These are just body parts. So just as comfortably as we can say nose or ear or eye, they should be able to say those body parts, because when they're more confident, that helps keep them safer and able to speak up if anything were to be concerning or unsafe were to happen to these body parts. We don't want them saying cookie or wee wee and not being familiar with the actual names of those parts. That sends an underlying message of shame. So that would be definitely earlier and ongoing. We want to get more confident and comfortable talking about bodies, normalizing the beautiful diversity of bodies. And then certainly as they move closer into those ages, again, as early as 7, 8, 9, 10, we want to make sure that, especially if their bodies may menstruate, that we're talking about menstruation before the bleeding begins. Too many adults of today have, stories of no one having told them what periods were, and they began bleeding, and they were horrified, terrified. They thought they were dying, all of these things. Completely unnecessary for us to carry forward that kind of experience for a young person. So normalizing those conversations, I always offer this just very easy, accessible activity. Next time you're at the grocery store, next time you're at a convenience store, there's a period product aisle. Walk on down it, whether you menstruate or not, whether they menstruate or not, visit that aisle and say, do you know what these products are? Or let's see which products are here and which ones are missing, right? Because they're not going to sell all the products. Or what differences do you notice, between each of these different products? So it just becomes a teachable moment to ensure that they have that information and that knowledge.
That's a great activity. We are nearing up to the end of our time together. So I want to make sure that we can touch upon that puberty is not just reproduction, right? So what are some of the other things when we're having these ongoing conversations that we touch upon? I know on our Facebook pages and whatnot, and other ways that we have conversations, there's a lot about young ladies shaving of arms and boys and having to learn to use deodorant and stuff. But what are some of the other things that we should be mindful to create safe and brave spaces to have conversations about?
Yeah. So I think it's important, especially in this modern time, for us to acknowledge that media and, again, the online spaces, we need to help them understand how to navigate those safely, and just, what personal responsibility is around that, what, safety elements, because those will be the judgment-free spaces that young people will turn to if they have questions, or even they could be introduced to it by someone else, by a peer. So it's important that we're keeping those communications open about online safety, about the devices that they're given access to, because the tween and teen years are prime time for them to be utilizing these resources, especially now with so much online schooling that has happened for so many. There are so many families that were, awakened to the fact that, oh gosh, we hadn't been talking about things like, porn, which I know you all had a great session, with Justine on that. So highly recommend, if you didn't watch that one, go back and revisit that, because these are important. This very much relates to these years of puberty and helping them develop media literacy. Also pleasure. It's so important that young people are not scared of their own body and what their own body can do. When a young person knows what feels good to their body, they also can know what does not. And that helps keep them safer. And so when they know that it's completely normal and completely typical, for especially the genital area, for areas of their genital, to find pleasure within that, masturbation, these are completely typical behaviors. And so for them to have that recognized and normalized can help them to better understand and get to know their body.
So we're having these conversations not just for the knowledge base and so that they feel comfortable and confident, but there's a safety element to it too. So for those of us who are still a little hesitant, maybe that safety element will throw you across the line and you'll say, okay, we're going to have these conversations, plural conversations. I'm trying to think, is there anything that
if I can just add one more element too, one more thing that's just so important to say out loud and then also to model is, if you ever have a question, if you're ever worried about something related to your body, here are the people that you can turn to, whether that's yourself, help them identify at least one other adult that they can feel comfortable turning to. It's just so important that we expressly name this for them, again, not just once, but throughout their journey, because we're not with them 24/7, right? We don't know all the things that they may experience, that they may be exposed to, that they may be wondering inside. And so the more that we keep that door open, the more likely it is that they'll walk through it.
We have a comment. Lori says, parents, we all need to do a better job on educating our children about puberty. Using the school system is not enough. Have those talks. Lori, in some school systems, they don't even have them in the school, and others, you don't know what they're saying. So I agree with you.
Yes. Absolutely. That's why we do the work that we do at Sex Positive Families, because there are gaps. There are real gaps that are happening across the US and certainly even worldwide when it comes to sexuality education and puberty education. So it does put a lot on us as parents, as primary caregivers. We are with our children more than a school system is ultimately, right? Or even no matter how great of a sexuality educator your student may have, access to, that is just usually like maybe an hour, or maybe 10 sessions or something, right? You have the most influence. Your young person wants to hear it from you ultimately.
Yeah. So I asked this of all of our guests, what is if we only had one takeaway, one thing that we remembered from this conversation, what should it be?
Start the talks. You have what it takes. You are absolutely enough. There are many resources here that will help support you through. You can learn together. There's a lot of different ones all mushed into one, but it's just so important that as parents and caregivers, we recognize that this is an opportunity. It's not a threat. It is an opportunity for us to create a more connected, a more informed experience for our young people than many of us had. And you can do this. You got this. And if you're not sure, you can go to sexpositivefamilies.com. You can browse our resources. We also hold live virtual puberty workshops called Growing Into You. They're gender inclusive puberty workshops. We've served almost 2,000 families since last year, literally from around the globe, that join us on Sundays, usually one Sunday out of every month. We have these sessions. They sell out pretty quickly. So if you're even just curious about it, check out our website at sexpositivefamilies.com. And it's an opportunity to learn with your young person and alongside other families. And we also have a self-paced course for families who may prefer to do that learning and that education, just within their own family at their own pace.
I've checked those out. So anybody who is wondering about how they're going to craft these conversations or what to include, please go to the website. We have it in the comments section. You can get some ideas. You can use her workshops. They're wonderful tools for you. And I'm so glad that you remembered to mention that. I want to let everybody know that although this is it for our conversation today, there will be another conversation tomorrow when there is coffee with Jen and Sharon. Jen and Sharon always talk about the realities of raising teens. So you should get your favorite morning beverage and join us same place, Facebook Live or our YouTube channel live, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, Wednesday morning. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. We appreciate you taking time with us today.
Thank you. And thank you all. Thanks for doing the loving work at home. We're all raising a powerful next generation. So I'm just honored to be parenting alongside you all.